My Discord is updating.
Oh, now full time.
I had to reboot it to turn on sharing, and then
I think we got some. We're still okay. Good. Usually, yeah. I know exam. Yeah. Hello, hello. Can everybody hear me live? Good morning, niche community. Hello, game developers of NJIT and whoever else might be watching this. Can they even see me all the way over here? Yeah, I'm like the off-screen. I'm the off-screen shadow. I'm the ghost of IGDA. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. How's it going, Miguel? Doing all right. If y'all could check in today, we're using a Google form. Highlander Hub is down. Thank you, Cloudflare. Thank you, Cloudflare. People on stream, if you guys could scan the QR code, the QR code will also be up throughout the whole stream. So have a my beloved e-board in the back. If we could post the Q&A link at some point during the session on announcements, that would be awesome. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. Scan in, scan in. We should start. Is there anything? How did you want me to introduce you? By the way, did you just want me to, I think I was just going to all Scramble.
perfect. The one thing I want to do a tech check on first is if I am using my Discord to stream, I would love to have game audio as well. It's not critical, but if we can have it, then that means I need to share my audio, so I have to make sure my Discord isn't playing any audio loop, essentially, right? So,
I think it's almost like you yourself are muted and you're sharing stream audio. It should capture. I see.
as long as no one talks in that channel.
Yeah, no, everybody
Or-
should be muted. There's some today. You get audio from if we're gonna, I think you're gonna stream video game audio. Yeah.
There's going to be a few game clips,
Yeah.
which would be nice with. Still just waiting for Discord to update.
Thank you for
Yeah,
very excited for this event. Our guest speaker.
that's it. Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me. Should be fun. Talk wraps up at 4. Is
Yeah,
the end?
probably a little earlier.
Okay.
We're gonna maybe 20 minutes. A lot of
Uh,
some people only come up the around the
yeah, I was just gonna say I can stick around until probably 4:30 for if you want to advertise that.
yeah. I think maybe I can shorten our announcement and then we can our how long do you have for your
I can rush and shorten certain segments, so it's pretty flexible.
yeah be like yeah, we should be good. All right. If I where yeah, I just off for oh yeah. So if I press this, you can hear me, and then if I turn it now you hear me. Now you don't. Yeah, I know. You were coming yeah. All right.
Uh, not super. I was in Japan for Tokyo Game Show, so that was the last big one of the year. Uh, it was interesting. That was my first time ever going. It was huge. I was really unprepared for the scale. It was because I've been to a lot of conventions. I'm just gonna try tethering for a second to see if it's the Wi-Fi. Um,
If you want, I can also log into the secure network by my my credentials. I can get you in
yeah,
if it's having a hard time, or if the stream quality needs it.
that
No
was a
problem
speed
doing
thing,
that.
so that might be prudent.
Okay.
We should probably do that. Go ahead and
Yeah. Let me I get to- all right. NJIT secure. Okay. I'm trying to remember. Okay. I think we are. Or yeah, it's fine. Oh, hello, hello. Are we here for the fighting game workshop? Thank you, thank you. Scan on in. We've got the QR code for everybody. Is the connection any better now?
yeah,
Awesome, awesome. Be all right. Okay, we'll go back. Yeah, yeah. We'll probably post the VOD up. I know you wanted a copy of the live stream, right?
mhm.
Yes, we'll send you the VOD, and everything should be it should be all set, ready to go.
Is that coming through on the Discord share? Good. But actually, yeah. Can we toss the audio?
Yeah, let's make sure the audio on that is working. No, wait, I can ask. How's it looking, chat? How's the stream audio going? I totally can't see that chat from all the way up here. But I guess I can make myself visible to everybody. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. If you want to scan in, Highlander Hub no worky. Thank you. So yeah, that's the because I think that's true actually. I can see chat from up here. Scan the QR code, please. Thank you. Thank you. I know it right after the AWS thing too, right? Something. It's in the water. Something's in the air.
Oh, I forgot I was in the official. Can I?
It's me. I'm in the air. I'm the one messing with the servers. I don't know. Maybe it's the power overload or something at this point. I know there's some data centers like the grid can't handle it.
Try what now? Yes. Just be like hit sound effects.
You guys got anything? I love how we have like the DJ station in the back. We look great. So cool. Cool. DJ, press it right. We hear it? Awesome. Okay. How we doing today, everybody? All good? Yeah. Anyone here have a common later today? I know the stats common is today. Yeah. Yeah. Feeling ready for that? I believe in the me who believes in you. And I believe in you. Therefore, you will succeed. I know you got this. Okay, I think it's about time we got started. Yeah, all good to go. All right. Can everybody hear me? Can the stream hear me? Awesome, awesome. All right. really quickly before we begin today's workshop, everybody scanned in. Everybody in the room scanned in. Awesome. All right. Now we're gonna go with our usual. We start our meetings with an everybody vote. So for today's everybody vote, I would like for you guys to choose your fighter. Who is winning in this bout? Who here votes for Ronald McDonald from Rivals of Aether? Okay, all right. And who here is voting Omni-Man from Mortal Kombat specifically? This is one of two. Sorry, move it down. I will slide it down a little bit. Okay, I think it's pretty much unanimous at this point that Ronald McDonald is winning this bout. I think we're all familiar with the Rivals of Aether lore here. Okay, that makes sense. Alrighty, everybody. Is everybody on our Discord here? Awesome, awesome. This will be very important momentarily. We got one scan? All right, all good. Awesome. Alrighty, everybody. Today we're going to be running our fighting game workshop courtesy of a special guest of ours who I will reveal in a moment. But first, a few announcements. For those of you who are not aware, we are running the plug and play game right now. Submissions will close for that on November 30th at 11 p.m. So still free to submit for that game. You can submit as many games as you want. If you guys need any details about the game, they should be on the Discord and announcements. We posted this for the kickoff. If you guys have any questions about it, you can DM myself or any one of our beloved. We've got the Game Awards watch party coming up. That will be on, I believe it's December 19th? 11th. Thank you. December 11th, Game Awards watch party. We'll post some more details about that soon. And finally, for any seniors and juniors in the crowd, IT 485 special topics is up. You can register for this course. You will have to get registered for this course. If you guys don't know what this is a collaborative course that is sponsored by NJIT and a philanthropist. The goal will be to come up with a project based on a fable that is written by the philanthropist. So if you guys are looking to come up with a portfolio piece, or you want to work on a massive capstone piece, sign up for this course. You'll have to reach out to Matt Fogel or UK Kehoe if you would like to get information for this topic. Alrighty, that's about all we have for announcement. So I would like to introduce our guest speaker for today. Today we are going to be running How to Design a Fighting Game, courtesy of our very special guest speaker. He is the founder of Scramble Games. Still cutting out? Oh, there we go. All right, courtesy of MPOL. Oh, I almost revealed the name. I mean, I kind of revealed the name already. We have a guest speaker today to talk about how to design a fighting game. He is the founder of MPOL Games, the studio behind Scramble, Heart City, and Tough Love Arena. Let's give it up for Paul Weeks.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Of course,
Let's
we're very honored to have you.
see if this works.
Oh, yeah. Really quickly, everybody, out of respect for our guest speaker, if you could save your questions for the end. I don't know if you saw, but there's a QR code up there for a Q&A form. So if you have any questions, post the form, and we will ask them on your behalf towards the end of the presentation. Yep, so if anyone didn't get it, there should be a link on announcements in Discord. If anyone is on the stream right now, check out the stream. There should be a QR code for the Q&A form alongside the videos.
Just a
All right,
moment.
how we feeling today? We excited for some fighting game design? Woo! Who here is looking to? Sorry. We'll find out exactly what that means after today's workshop. That's exactly what we're here for today. Sorry. You will learn how to enable people to throw virtual hands by creating your own fighting game. Work.
There we go.
All
All
good.
right.
All right. Hopefully, I think that that should be on screen in a moment. Can everybody find the? Was everybody able to find the Q&A form? Okay. All right. Awesome. Yeah. The. I think the. Let me try messing with the HDMI cable here. I know this one's a little finicky. Can somebody check the HDMI panel back there? Nothing on your end, right?
It is recognizing it's plugged in.
Okay,
So
that's really interesting. It should be mirrored at this point.
try a different dongle.
I was gonna say we also have an HDMI cable if we want to try that. All right, I'll mute myself for now. Technical difficulties, everybody. We'll bring you our regular program momentarily. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, never mind.
Oh, we got it. Woo, awesome. Ready. Let's give another round of applause for our guest speaker, Paul Weeks.
Just to make sure Discord stream is still okay. All right. Welcome everyone. I'm M. Paul Weeks, and I'll be giving a talk and then a Q&A after about how to design a fighting game. If you are interested in this talk and the details, go ahead and scan that QR code. There's a link to my website and also this slideshow. Technically, it's the last talk slideshow. I'll have this up later today, but all the info, I'm going to mention a few sources. I'm going to mention some other articles and other YouTube videos. It's all provided there. And we'll show this again at the end for anyone who comes in late. Let's jump into it. So who am I? Why should you bother listening to what I have to say? You know, I don't know if I can call myself an expert yet, but I do have some experience making fighting games. I'm currently making my second one, Scramble City. The first one, Tough Love Arena, went into open beta in January of 2021 and has been operational and played by players every day for the last, oh God, how many years is that? A few. And we've been doing weekly tournaments every Friday for, I mean, we're up to like 250-ish. So we have a tight Fortnite community that's still playing, and based on my analytics, still a lot of students who play it during the day because our player base tanks during the summer. But that's been going great, and now I've started on this new one. I heard some people in the pre-show have some recognition for Rivals of Aether. If there's any fans of the fan-created character Lorena, who got selected to eventually be promoted to Rivals 2, she's like the bug luchador. The two artists who made Lorena are actually working on Scramble Heart with me. So some shared DNA there. I've also exhibited at a bunch of cons, given talks like this before. I was on stage at Evo talking to the Cannon brothers who work at Riot and own Evo. We're not friends, but I have at least been adjacent to important people. So that's my claim to fame. What you can expect today is we'll do a quick overview of building blocks of fighting games just to establish some shared vocabulary. I don't know how many of you, how intimate you are with game design up to this point. I don't want to make any assumptions, so some of this may be a review. We'll go through some gameplay design for the genre, talk about balancing, some best practices, and then QA. And to clarify, when we talk about 2D fighting games, we're talking about games that look like this, not like this. This is different. This is 2D, and this is 3D. I know it's very obvious, but just to be clear, when we talk about 2D, we talk about gameplay that exists just on the two-dimensional plane, which describes almost every fighting game except for basically Tekken, Soul Calibur, platform fighters like Smash and Rivals, and like arena fighters where you're like over the shoulder, like Pokken or something. But any place where you're just moving left, right, up, down, that's a 2D fighter. A lot of the stuff I'll talk about still applies to 3D fighters and plat fighters. Sometimes the metaphor is a little strange. So this talk is focusing on 2D, but a lot of it is transferable. So let's go into building blocks. To get a little technical to start, but this is the best term for it, think of a fighting game character as a finite state machine. Meaning that there's a finite number of states they can be. They're only ever one state at a time. They can have stuff like momentum, they can have properties of damage, but when you're thinking about designing the character, they're only ever doing one thing. A lot of your job as a designer is describing what those possible states are and what the relationships between them are. So very obviously, from standing, you can go into punching, you can go into blocking, you can go into crouching. You can't go into an air attack. you have to jump first. And then while you're airborne, you could do an air attack. And likewise, there isn't such a thing as running and attacking. You have a running attack you get to from the running state. So if anything ever seems like confusing, or when you want to really strip it down, you're just defining a handful of these actions. What does my punch look like? What does my running attack look like? And you go from there. And you can always think of it as always should reset back to standing, or like recovering an air, or knockdown, which will go back to standing. Hitboxes and hurtboxes. I like to describe fighting games as really just rectangles. I think they're simultaneously really easy to make and really hard to make. I think they're hard to make from like a design, game feel, enjoyment perspective, but from a like building blocks, physics, make your first game one-on-one perspective, they're very simple. It's the most basic collision you can have. Here on the screen, we have 3 types of boxes. These colors sometimes change in terms of what means what, but almost always a red box is the hit box. So this is the part where Jonah can hit someone else. Sorry, Joda. Where Joda can hit someone else with this little spike. The blue indicate his hurt boxes. Sometimes people call these hit boxes. We're going to be a little more specific in this talk. So hit box is where I'm hitting you. Hurt box is where I could be hurt. So anywhere in this blue box is his hurt box. And then this green is what we'd call the push box. The role of the push box is such that no 2 push boxes can ever overlap. This is what prevents characters from clipping into each other. So that's usually always tied to their body. The color of push box and hurt box vacillates based on designer. There doesn't seem to be an equivalence. And all your job as a game designer is to say, for this state, the boxes go here, and then you just check, are the angry red boxes touching any blue boxes? That's fighting. Easy, right? Here it is in motion. So in this case, again, blue is the hurt box, green is the push box. You can see QB from Darkstalkers doing a little combo here. And you've got all this pretty animation, you've got this really expressive thing, but from a gameplay interaction standpoint, it's just boxes. Did her little red boxes touch one of the many blue boxes? Now, you don't have to actually use boxes per se. This is from Marvel's Capcom 3. In that game, they use spheres, which makes sense because they have 3D models. And then you can just sort of tie, especially for hurt boxes, you can just tie them to like joints on the skeleton or the model. And actually, if you have the ability to, spheres are kind of easier to check detection because boxes, you can sometimes have edge cases of like they're inside each other. Spheres, you just draw the distance between 2 centers and ask, is that distance less than the sum of their radiuses? So pretty straightforward. But to create like multiple hitboxes or like a area, tend to like add a bunch of smears. If you've ever looked at like Super Smash Bros. Melee frame data, they have like these spheres with tweens. But it's all the same difference. And Tekken apparently does like cylinders. I don't know how to read this, but every game will have their own slight variation, but it's all the same principle. I've got my angry boxes and my hurt and my vulnerable boxes, hit and hurt, just checking collisions. Gameplay design. So you want to make a fighting game. What are some of the first things you need to do before you sit down and start programming? First, you should decide, even within the genre, the subgenre of 2D fighters, what subgenre you want to be, because it has massive implications. And I feel like those are often divided by movement. There's a great video by Core A Gaming that came in the last year called like the taxonomy of fighting games, where over an hour they cover all types of fighting games from 2D to Arena to Power Stone to whatever. And they break this down in tree format if you want to see all the examples. But something to keep in mind is generally the better you make the movement, the better the defense is going to have to be. If you make a really fast game that's like Marvel vs. Capcom fast, where Magneto can fly around and everything, but if you made that without push block, which is a very strong defensive mechanic where at no cost, for no resources, if you block someone, you can push them pretty far away. Without that defensive mechanic, it's completely unplayable. Magneto just completely suffocates you to death. And like half the cast. So going in, knowing like how you want your game to read, how you want it to look, know that you will have to make that trade-off. You'll have to just, these go together. Likewise, if you like a lot of the varied defensive mechanics like a Guilty Gear, where they have blocking, instant blocking, faultless defense, instant blocking, faultless defense, bursting, YRC, and others. That wouldn't make sense in like Street Fighter. If the defensive mechanics are that strong, people may not ever be able to really hit each other. So these things go hand in hand. Character design. As you're designing characters, ask yourself, what is the power fantasy? What about them feels cheap? Because there's a lot of things about a character that can appeal to people, like the aesthetics, the character literal design in terms of here's Yun, the cool skater boy. But often what makes characters endure, what makes them popular and create archetypes is that they feel like they can break the rules. So some common examples that we'll talk more about later are grapplers are defined by having big grabs. And grabs are scary because they're unblockable. If you're fighting against Ryu, you can block 99% of what he's doing. And the one thing he does you can't block, he has to be like really close to you. It does a little grab. You have like, you can tack it. There's a lot of ways out of it. But Zangief can be 3 feet away from you and just scoop you up no matter what you're doing. That really changes the game. So make sure, I think there can be a place for an all-rounder like Ryu, but you don't want to have a game of all-rounders. You want to make sure that the majority of your characters do something that feels cool. Talking about hitboxes and hurtboxes, something you should decide as a game designer is how much you want to rely on them for certain interactions. So in a game like BlazBlue, when you want to design an anti-air, okay, an attack, because that's a game where a lot of characters spend time in the air, and you can block in the air, and you can do lots of really strong things in the air. Street Fighter. If I want to design an anti-air in BlazBlue, I will design it such that I have my, hitbox up here, but my hurt boxes will have a special property that basically ignore airborne attacks. So as long as I'm doing this move, if you're in the air, you cannot hit me, which means I will beat you. If we collide with each other, I just ignore your hitboxes and I power through. That's one way of doing it, a more property-based approach. This is a screenshot of, with some elements removed, of Guilty Gear Strive. And instead, they design anti-airs through pure hitboxes. In this case, the yellow is the push box. And you can see that Soul has a big hurt box that correlates with his model, and a decent chunk on the bottom right is the hitbox. That's a pretty good attack. It's pretty big and pretty generous. A lot of characters in Strive, hitboxes are contained inside their hurt boxes. So the fact that it's like not disjointed isn't too abnormal. But Bridget on the right, her hurt box is down her shins. She will basically ignore everything shins up for the middle of that attack when her yo-yo is above her head. Which then, in this interaction, if these two were to collide, Bridget can hit Soul, but Soul can't hit Bridget. This works, and some people, players and designers, prefer this rather than the really prescriptive, like this beats that, whereas this feels more like a natural interaction of systems. But this has trade-offs, because now, let's say Soul's just standing on the ground, and he has an attack where he punches like face level. That will also not hit Bridget, because she can only be hit by her shins. And so that might look a little weird. She's doing an anti-air, and she's just phasing through things that are like at chest level. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. It definitely defines the texture of all the Guilty Gear games. That characters will often have like strong grounded attacks that reach pretty far and hit sort of this area. And what Bridget's doing is a universal tool that everyone has, where they can just shrink their hurt box down to their shins and avoid those attacks. So it both beats airborne and certain standing pokes. Trade-offs. Combo design. I like to describe fighting games as actually 2 games. You have the part that maybe feels more analogous to fighting, the mind games, the pressure, the neutral, how to approach. And then you land a hit. And at that point, it turns into a rhythm game. There's a game designer named David Sirlin. Love him or hate him. He's written a lot of really influential and smart literature about fighting games. And I think I listened to a podcast he did once where he called it baking a cake. I think rhythm game is an easier analogy, but credit to him for pointing this out to me. It's a totally different game, and it stresses a totally different skill set. And every game has this to some degree. Even games with shorter combos, like Street Fighter 2, has combos. And you could be a player, and there's some characters that basically don't have combos. And you could play them so that you never have to learn how to do combos, because you're never losing anything by not having that skill. Whereas if you're better at playing the rhythm game than at playing your opponent, you can pick a character who's more defined by their combos. That's their strength, and explore that. I think there's pros because it gives you another avenue for skill expression. It also gives you a really tangible way to track your own internal progress and improvement. And I think that's very satisfying. It can be kind of misleading because you may think, oh, I spent 2 days in training room, I can now do combos, I'm great now. And then actually you go online, you never get a chance to do them because you never hit the opponent in the first place. And that could be disappointing. But I think it's great that it gives these games that are designed to be played with our humans a way to play them by yourself, even just to build up an appetite to practice, to get interested, to then go back and play your friend again. But real con, that's less game time where the other person is playing. And some games I think take it too far. It's all personal preference. That's basically why I stopped playing Dragon Ball Fighter Z, the game I really liked, because if you've watched any videos from that, and it's only gotten worse and worse as patches have gone on, those combos last like a full minute. And at a certain point, in Marvel 3, we called this when Zero would do loops on you, you'd call it like watching the movie. I sat down to play a fighting game. I don't want to watch a movie. I don't want to just sit here and make 3 decisions where I didn't block right, and then otherwise spend 5 minutes just watching my characters. Like, to a certain point, it just didn't seem like a good use of my time. But it's all preference. There's no right or wrong answer. There's different audiences for each. But know who you're targeting. Don't wishy-washy one way or the other. You can find a balance, but like, what do you want to play? What skills do you want to reward and players you want to attract? On that note, once you have combos, you need infinite combo prevention. Here's a bunch of words. I won't read all of them. You can read the slides later or try to read this now if you want. There's a famous little clip on the bottom right of someone showing how to do freaking infinite with Iron Man. But there's lots of different approaches. I will say, increasingly, a lot of games, I think, are moving towards knockdown value. There isn't a great word for this yet. They may not call it knockdown value. But personally, I'm doing it Scramble Heart. There's a variant of it in 2xKO. It's the one that I feel gives designers the most control and is the least open to like loopholes, where a lot of games that like relied on histon deterioration to solve infinite combos ended up still having infinite combos because Dante has a certain move in Marvel 3 that you want to always end with a cool knockdown, so it kind of breaks the rule, and then players find a way to abuse that and just keep breaking the rule over and over and over again. So, food for thought. Balancing and just checking how are we doing on time. And when should we wrap up for Q&A? Perfect. Alrighty, balancing. Very important tweet that I will read out loud. There was a patch years ago where we told players we were nerfing Vlad in the patch notes, but accidentally didn't ship the changes. This is from Riot. Even though he was completely unchanged, his win rate went down as though we had actually nerfed him. Balance is important. Balance is desirable. If your game is unbalanced, people won't play it. But the perception of balance is kind of more important than actual balance. Modern games have all sorts of tools to collect statistics, and you can just view them in the back end of all matches ever played online. You can find out categorically which characters are strong and which ones are weak. One, you have to be careful about measuring. Anytime you have a metric, you accidentally can optimize for the wrong thing. Little anecdote. I had a fan site I made back when Street Fighter V launched, and everyone was excited before we found out it wasn't fun. That would scrape CFN to get character stats. And that Ryu was terrible. He had like a 40% win rate, which is pretty bad. But then once I started filtering by rank, it turns out it's just that Ryu is a character a lot of beginners play, and beginners lose. So if you filtered by just like gold and above, Ryu had like a 52% win rate. So one, you should be careful about data. It could lead you to some bad assumptions, especially in like a team game where that can get more complicated. But secondly, it really doesn't even matter. What matters is the perception, because you want the game to look good in tournaments. You want the game to be attractive to people and not have them feel discouraged. But always keep that in mind. That's your goal. Second, what does balance mean? This is a real matchup chart for Street Fighter 2 Super Turbo from the perspective of E, the middle. And that is, if you're not familiar with the 5-5-10-0 notation, that is describing the fact that the top row, Honda beats 70% of the time. The bottom row, Honda beats 30% of the time. Now, this is largely because Honda is an absolute menace with really powerful buttons, but he's kind of big and slow. So basically, everyone on the bottom row has a good fireball. And fireballs just cheese Honda out. But anyone without a fireball just gets mauled to death. So you could say Honda's perfectly balanced, because if you averaged all of his matchups, he'd be like 50% across the board. That is not a fun character to play against. A lot of characters are this way in Super Turbo, and as a result, it's a very counter pick based game where most people who are really serious about it, well, one, either you play one of the two top tiers who just beat everyone. But if you're not them, or if you've banned Sagat in that tournament, or Claw or someone, you'll know multiple characters. Because you may be really good with Honda, but if you go against a DJ, just pick a different character. I don't think that's great. I think that is undesirable. So again, if you're using measurements, or even like fan-made measurements, where you're taking vibes, characters are going to have advantages. Characters are going to have disadvantages. That's part of the texture of the game that you want to. But it should never be this polarized. So let's say you do want to do balance. You're convinced by your own intuition or by players complaining enough that something's wrong and you want to fix it. I like to break balancing tools into 3 categories to describe them, from increasing from low to high in terms of effort and complexity. So number 1, super simple, stats. To me, stats are numbers you change, where it's really easy. Just go into code, change one number. It doesn't change moment-to-moment gameplay. Nothing about the texture of the gameplay changes, but the output will be very predictable. So easy examples are health, damage, and meter. Nothing is changing about what Ryu's combos look like. Nothing is changing about this matchup if Honda does a little bit more damage on his hands, if he never gets close enough to hit Ryu with his hands, right? But it can be effective, because if you think of it this way, if we have a theoretical character named Steve, and Steve did infinite damage with every hit, that would be the best character in the game, right? And if he did 0 damage with every hit, he'd be the worst character in the game. So clearly there must be some point in the middle where he's perfectly balanced, right? That can make it a very appealing tool. It's very low risk. It's very cheap to change, and it's pretty predictable. Is it effective though? This is a fun little graph that I made. The x-axis, unlabeled, is numbered 1 to 50-ish. The y-axis, also unlabeled, is numbered 0 to 1,000,000. Would anyone in the audience like to guess what the x and y-axis are? That'd be pretty hard. One clue. This is for Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Any takers? Character ID. So very close. So yes, the y-axis is the health. The health range and the health values in Marvel range from usually about 750,000 to 1,250,000. I can't say numbers. With one very clear exception. This is Phoenix, who infamously has very low health, because if you kill her in certain circumstances, she comes back to life with health. The numbers are not the character index. These are tiers. This is the ranking of best character to worst character, where, pretty understandably, you can see Phoenix at number 3 if you've heard any complaints. And if anything, this chart shows you from its general trend that the characters with less health are better. It doesn't matter that they have less health. They're better characters, Phoenix being an extreme example. But all these other ones, like, I think this is 0. This might be Morgan or no, this is probably Virgil. And then up here you have Thor, who has the most health in the game. That doesn't help him. He's down at like number 40. So this is after multiple patches. Sentinel, who is I think probably around like here, used to be up here on like day 1, and he had the most health, and they nerfed him down to this much. But he's not bad now because he has less health. He's bad because people realized he's kind of bad. He was kind of a noob killer, and people learned how to play against him. So have some humility when you try and do this, and recognize what has happened in the past. People often say, oh, Akuma's fair because he has less health than everyone else. And Akuma has always been one of the best characters in every game he's ever played. A difference of 10% health doesn't matter. Now, there has to be a limit where if Akuma had 1 health, clearly he wouldn't be the best. But health is not very reliable as a balancing tool. So what else do we have? We have knobs. Knob stats is they actually change gameplay. So they can be easy to change because it's just describing how long an attack takes or what's the width on my hitbox. Very easy. But can have big implications. And sometimes you'll have balance patches where simply because you turned a knob and made Ryu's, made his like donkey kick a little bit faster, now he has new combo routes. Now he can convert from a far light kick into a donkey kick and have brand new routes, and that feels like new content for players. That can excite them. Like, ooh, I want to try out the new combos that Ryu has because you just changed one number. You didn't even like add anything new per se. Let's go back to hitboxes and hurtboxes. As we described in Guilty Gear, this is how they design anti-airs. They want anti-airs to be good. Bridget's anti-air works because Soul cannot hit her without being hit himself, right? But what happens if someone has a jumping hitbox that looks like this? Then the design behind anti-airs doesn't work so good. Now it's not a clean beat. And there could be situations where actually Ramlethal on the left could maybe hit Bridget, not get hit back herself. Now this can be intentional or unintentional, desirable or undesirable. And all it is changing the XY values and the width and height of certain boxes. But you could do this to make Ram better in the air or to make her harder to anti-air, right? We're going to talk very briefly about frame data. It's a big kind of boogeyman term, frame data, that people are intimidated by. I've learned in previous versions of this talk that I spent too long. Now it's full green. Test. All right. Should I back up at all, or are you good? Cool. The most important thing here is startup. So things take a different amount of time to come out. That's how you define a fast tech versus slow tech. How long do they spend doing the wind-up animation? In Guilty Gear Strive, this is, I think, from day one. This has probably changed. Now it's full green. Testing. Hello. All right. So fastest attack per character. What this means, and so what are frames? Because we don't like to talk in milliseconds. Most fighting games run at a fixed 60 frames per second time step, which turns out to be effectively 16.6 repeating milliseconds per frame. So when we say something takes 5 frames to come out, that means if you were to step frames, and we can show this in my game, Rosie has this big overhead slash. And if we were to step it frame by frame, which you can see counted up here in this tiny little number, and it's not changing exactly every frame because it's 2D animation, so it's not that smooth, but it's like frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then it hits, right? And so if we were to do, if I did this move, and the other Rosie did a slower attack that winds up longer and goes further, then as we step it through, I'm going to hit player 2 first because her attack was slower, right? Makes sense. I hope it makes sense. So in this game, Soul's fastest attack, the top guy, angry red guy, the protagonist of the series called Soul Bad Guy. Wonderful game. His fast attack comes out in 3 frames. It hits on frame. Whereas Anji, a beautiful nerd in the bottom left, his fast attack comes out in 6 frames. So if Soul and Anji are standing right next to each other, they both try and do their fastest attack, Soul will always win. And there's nothing Anji can do that's faster. Maybe Anji has like a super move that's invulnerable or has armor, so he could sort of like absorb Soul's attack and then hit him. But Soul has that advantage. Not all games do this, or don't have this big of a gap. And I think they may have closed this gap slightly over time, but I'm an expert on Strive recently. But this has huge matchup implications. This can be a way that you want to add flavor to your matchup, but I don't think it's necessary. If anything, it makes balancing certain tools really hard. If we think about like punishing, which has to do with the recovery aspect, there's the very obvious example, which is, so player 2's design is programmed to block everything, right? The classic punishable move is the uppercut. I do a big thing. If it were to hit them, then they fly up in the air with me and I can do extra stuff. But if they block it, I fall down helplessly. And you can see player 2's blocking it, but she recovers while I'm still up in the air. Now she can act freely, so she can hit me on the way down, and I can't block because I'm still in my uppercut state, right? I'm not yet at one of my more neutral states where I could switch to blocking. That's what makes the uppercut unsafe on block. It takes so long to recover relative to how long they're stuck. Compared to something like, let's take a look real quick, this attack. So this attack is a lot closer. And in fact, we can see right here, actually, I don't know if that helps. We can do this. So this little bar down here is illustrating the fact that the top row is all the time that player 1 was stuck doing something. Green was the startup, the windup. Red was the part where the sword was actually hitting. And blue was all the time that it was doing the follow-through, recovery. And yellow was the part where player 2 was stuck blocking. You can see that player 2 finished blocking before player 1 finished attacking. So player 2 could act first. And in old games where they had less tools and didn't have frame data or stuff, the way they would test this is by just holding up with both players and see who jumps first. So if I do that, you'll see P2 leaves the ground first. They can act first. However, that's a pretty tight gap. If P2 tries to counterattack, it's not fast enough. Player 1 has enough time to recover and attack. So player 2's faster, but not fast enough. But I, as a game designer, can turn that knob. I could go in here and I could say, hey, let's make the big swing -10 on block, or -20 on block, which means I still have to spend the same amount of time on recovery. Now, player 2 spends a very little time stuck, and they get to recover and move right away. And now, even though both characters are designed to block everything that they can, right? If I do this, then they can hit me because I was still stuck in those blue frames. So hopefully that made sense. Before I would just sort of describe it abstractly. Now we have a demo. But that's a simple knob. I just changed literally one number. And likewise, if I change that to +20, then every time they block it, they're stuck blocking. And now player 2 can't do anything. Because while you're in the blocking state, you can't do anything. So you have to wait for blocking to finish. And now I've created an infinite block because I just made this one move, then block a really long time. That's a knob. Very powerful tool you have as a designer. And I think is the most correct and often to go to. Lastly, we have what for lack of a better term, sometimes I call this like the paintbrush. Oops, sorry, it's a mic. But we're just going to call it design, which is, what if knobs aren't enough? What if knobs can't fix the underlying thing? Let's go back to that character design slide where we were talking about characters should have, big, splashy, extreme, cool strengths, like unblockable grabs, shooting full screen fireballs. But part of why those archetypes have endured for 20 years, like Grappler and Zoner, is because they also have weaknesses that make them interesting and make them balanced. So Grapplers have unblockable grabs, but that's a really strong tool, so they don't get to use that often because they're slow, and they struggle to get in. Maybe they're extra big, so it's harder for them to get around hard for them to get around fireballs. They are given sort of the challenge of getting to their win conditions, and then they get to exploit it. But you need that weakness to make the grappler interesting. Grappler player will complain about it. Like, why do I have to spend all this time getting in? Well, it's because you get to do unblockable bullshit, right? Oh, Spring's okay. And all the popular archetypes, these are some of them, have a corresponding weakness that goes with it. It defines the texture of the game. And some OP characters in games are just because their stats are too high, or because they do too much damage, or their knobs are too high, and like everything's plus on them. But most often, and when a character is kind of like hard to balance and they seem stuck at top tier despite nerfs, it's because they don't have weaknesses. They're just kind of good at everything, or they're really good at some stuff and not bad enough at other stuff. Example, this is Akuma from Super Street Fighter 2, cool game with the Honda matchup chart. This was the first character, to my knowledge, to be officially banned from basically all fighting game tournaments. No one ever plays a Super Turbo tournament, which is like a 30-plus-year-old game that still gets played. No one ever allows Akuma. And it's because he has, among many things, it's a lot of messed up stuff. But really the breaking thing is this move. I apologize, the HD remix is the best one I could find for this, where he shoots a diagonal air fireball. This has been a defining feature of his ever since the first game he was in. Very few other characters can do it. And the problem with Super Turbo is if I jump in the air and I shoot a diagonal down fireball, most characters in the game can't do anything about it. In later games, when you play like Street Fighter 6, characters could armor through it. They could drive in. Or maybe DJ has his EX upkicks where he can fly through it and ignore the fireball. And also in more modern versions, Akuma can only do it while jumping forward. So it's sort of committal, and maybe I can do it once, you block it, and now I'm point blank. I can't jump forward anymore. In the old games, Akuma could just jump backwards, throw this fireball, and it would just cover this angle that characters could not traverse. It was a tool that had no answer. And that just cannot work in that engine. And so people banned him. The HD Remix came along, and David Serlin, that designer we spoke about earlier, had a chance to rebalance all the characters. And he's like, I'm going to make Akuma fair. And he was still the best character in the game because he had an air fireball. As much as he nerfed other things about him, this tool was still too overwhelming. On the other end, this is Iron Fist from Marvel's Capcom 3. This is a game that with a big focus on like big air combos, and you launch someone up in the air. This is Iron Fist's launcher. He stomps the ground, and it would pop you up. This move cannot hit you if you're not on the ground. Where most launchers are like a big anti-air, like a big uppercut because it sends you flying up. He just stomps real hard. And it's not even that the hitbox is like short, it's just programmed to only touch grounded opponents. Unfortunately, this isn't a game where you spend 99% of the time in the air, even on defense. The best way to block in this game is called chicken blocking. You hold up back and you jump away because you can block in air. If you're in the air, you don't have to worry about high-low. So it's a lot easier to block. And this move just doesn't hit. If you were to juggle someone, you manage to catch someone midair and you're doing ABC, you cannot hit them with this because they're in the air. It's a totally worthless tool, and he's just like missing something. He just doesn't have a fundamental part of the game. This tool just doesn't make any sense. Best practices. And yeah. So these are, again, focused on fighting games, but I also think these apply to any kind of video game you make. These are sort of lessons learned I have from approximately 6 years of indie dev and largely learned from other people. So one, fighting games, and probably whatever genre you're working on, have evolved. In the fighting game case, old games, Street Fighter 2 basically invited the genre. Very simple defense. It had random damage stun values. The early versions, throws were inescapable. Some of these they fixed in later versions. Some of these fixed in later Street Fighters. Some of them were fixed in other games, and then Street Fighter copied those other games. But learn from history. I was a fool. In my first game, Tough Love Arena, I decided to try to have proximity throw, meaning there isn't a dedicated way to throw. It's just if you do heavy attack, like at point blank, it turns into a throw. The advantage as a game designer is that lets me have less buttons. I don't need to have a throw button. I could reuse that button on the controller for something else. And I was trying to build a very minimalist game. But the problem was, one, discoverability. I would take it to playtest, and people would just assume that there weren't throws until they did one on accident somehow. And two was that it could create weird situations where you wanted to do a point blank heavy attack, and instead you did a throw. Maybe the throw didn't work in that situation because the opponent was airborne or something. And you could try to fix that in some ways with coding, but it created more problems than it caused. And finally, after 2 years, I had to admit defeat and be like, so that's why everyone else has a throw button, and just admit it and add another button. Don't be like me. Learn from history. There's a reason a lot of these norms have changed, and why a lot of tropes in subgenres have evolved and endured to become the standard. Playtesting. It is never too early to playtest. I have this image of a baby, both because you can never be too young to playtest, but also because I perceive your playtesters as babies. Playtesting, whether it's at meetups or with friends or at conventions, is really, really valuable. I cannot stress that enough. And so I very firmly believe that as soon as you have like a game loop, as soon as you have something that is playable, it doesn't matter if it looks like butt, it doesn't matter if it has an infinite combo or if it has bugs, depending on how presentable it is, you take it to a friend or you take it to a convention, but get it in front of someone, because there's so much you will learn from a fresh perspective that you just cannot see on your own. You come in it with your own bias. You don't even think to try things. You can even have a team of 10 people, but you'll all be aligned the same way. And then you give it to someone else, and they're like, oh, I'm going to play this game completely differently. And either you're like, oh, that's amazing, or oh, I shouldn't let you do that, or something. You will learn something. Also, it can cultivate diehard fans. Scramble Heart City is not out yet, but we've been taking it to conventions, and we've been doing monthly online playtests where we'll put it up for like a weekend. And we're fostering a small community on our Discord server of people who are really invested. And every time we take the playtest down, they'll post the GIF of Spider-Man reaching for Mary Jane's ghost and go, no! And they get really excited about it. And these are people who not only will get invested enough so they can start to show you like more advanced playtesting. Because conventions are great for like that first look, but they're not gonna probably discover an infinite combo, right? These players will. And also, purely, if you want to be purely like self-interested, they're going to provide a lot of free marketing. Like, these are the fans who are going to go out and proselytize and go to random creators and be like, hey, you should do a video on Scramble Heart City, and get people into your game. They're going to spread word of mouth. They're going to spread goodwill, and they're going to be there to defend you in a way that you can't really do. And the earlier you start, the earlier someone gets in, I think the easier it is for them to feel that attached. Much of like, yeah, I was in at day 0. I saw when this had. But now it's good, and I can't wait to show it to people. Cultivate that. Try and build that. It's amazing. Player feedback. This is a photo of Mark Rosewater, the designer of Magic the Gathering forever. He has a wonderful talk that I link on my site called 20 Years, 20 Lessons. It's like 10 years old at this point. They're all really good, but my favorite one from him is, your audience is good at recognizing problems and bad at solving. The audience, in a fighting game example, they will say, man, Ryu is way too strong. I am really frustrated playing against his donkey kick. And you'll be like, oh, really? And they'll be like, yeah, you should just cut his legs. Real feedback I've gotten multiple times about certain characters. And sometimes it's a joke, but they don't usually see the big picture. It can often be coming from a very specific perspective of just, I'm playing this matchup. I don't like Chun-Li versus Ryu, so make Chun-Li stronger or make Ryu weaker. Or they don't understand exactly why it feels. There's a great book, also linked on my site, the game designer Adam Hart, also known as Keats, talking about Killer Instinct and how a lot of people complained about Jago, this character in Killer Instinct 2013, who had like a healing mechanic, like a slight vampire thing. Every time you'd hit, you would get a little bit of health. And people complained like, Jago's healing thing is busted. It's so bullshit. You got to either heal and nerf the healing or remove it. This character's top 1, and that's why, and we hate it. And the designers, I think, correctly saw that as like, that would be a stat solution, right? That's just changing number. That's probably not the real problem. And they looked into it, and they turned out it was more of a knob problem, which was that Jago was kind of those knob and design. The problem was that Jago was kind of good everywhere on screen. He had no weaknesses. And he was designed to be really good up close. He's like this ninja guy. And he was trying to be good really far away because he had a fireball. But if he was going to have a weakness, it should have been at like the mid range, where he's not close enough to use his little T-Rex arms, not far enough to shoot his fireball. But the problem is he had this move called wind kick, could get him in to his close range, and he would be like plus on the, or maybe like barely minus. But he could just sort of skip the bad part, get out of his bad range instantly, and then back into his good range. And so they just nerfed that tool. They made it that way worse at that function. It still worked in combos or whatever, but if you were trying to use it to just cheat your way in, then they could actually potentially punish you. Jago couldn't just skip to his win state, and then people stopped complaining about the health. So they're great at identifying things, and then when they say you should do this, nod politely. Sometimes they have interesting ideas, but just nod politely. They'll take the under advisement. Rollback netcode. So I won't get, the last two slides are pretty technical. I won't get super into these, but we can expand them more in the Q&A if anyone's interested. But in fighting games, compared to a lot of other modern online competitive games, fighting games are somewhat uniquely still two-player. So it often makes sense to do them peer-to-peer, which is great because for you as a developer, that's cheaper. You don't have to pay for servers outside of like very basic matchmaking. But if you're going to have something be peer-to-peer, you don't have an authoritative server to help broker what's the source of truth, what's the timing, when should things happen. And there's a gold standard of how to do this now. It's called rollback netcode. It's invented by Cannon Brothers in a version called GPO. Modern fighting games have this in some way or another, whether they're just using GPO source or they made it themselves. You cannot make a fighting game without this, or else people will not take it seriously. There's a lot of other indie fighting games I think are beautiful and really cool, but they don't have rollback netcode, or maybe they don't have any netcode, and so they'll never really get that because the expectation is you can play these games online. That's just the reality of our modern world. And the important thing to bring, and why I bring this up now, is because rollback is actually pretty easy if you do it day one, and it's really painful to do it for reasons I can expand on Q&A if you're curious. But again, linked on my slide on my website, there's a GDC talk from Mortal Kombat X days, where Mortal Kombat X 10 was released with delay-based netcode, basic way that netcode like sort of ships from an engine, which is bad for lots of reasons. And players were very upset and would complain endlessly. And at a time, a lot of the other fighting games had moved to rollback, and so players were like, "This is unacceptable." So the Mortal Kombat devs were like, "All right, we should get on the same page. We should really catch up with modern times. Let's do this now." And trying to add it to a game that was already out and finished took a team of 4 people 8 months as their full-time job. And if you just convert that into the salary, that's expensive. Whereas if you did that at the beginning, that would take like 2 people 1 month. So if you want to make a fighting game, make your prototype, make your very, very ugly prototype offline. Don't worry about this stuff. But as soon as you think you're going to be serious, really look into this. If you do want to do it, some very basic pointers and requirements. Your game has to be deterministic, so it can be resimulated really quickly. It has to be serializable, so it's easy to dump and reload game states. Rollback was invented on emulators. You could literally just dump, you would use save state and load state because the RAM for an arcade game is like 1 kilobyte. You need to decouple logic from rendering. This is one of the things that took more time of it, a long time, in addition to making it really go fast. Because you'll often be simulating multiple game states, and then rendering once. And you have to have that not jarring or look weird. And for them, like their particle effects would just like randomly change all over the time because it was randomly based. These are some of the considerations. And that's it. So I think we will open up to Q&A now, however the organizers want to do it. And thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you very much. This is a great presentation. I think we have some questions up from the forum, right? Can't hear me? All right, so check that first.
Yeah, here. You can talk into my chest.
Hello, hello, everybody. I'm here now. Let's see. Hopefully, can you guys hear me? All good? So, wait, mine. Yeah, oh no, it's okay.
Pass it.
Yeah. That's true. We can just hello, hello. Wait, is this one good or no? Oh, this one's good. Okay, perfect. I think mine's all good. Alrighty, let's have another round of applause for PlayNYC. Alrighty, just a reminder. Actually, I can switch over to the Q&A form on the screen here really quickly. Just a reminder, everybody, we have a form up for Q&A. I think my laptop. It should be on our Discord. It is also on the live stream, which should be a QR code for the Q&A form. So if you guys have any questions, you can come through there. In the meanwhile, I do have some questions for our guest speaker today. We're good to go. All right. First off, what is your favorite obscure fighting mechanic in a game, like a custom combo, grooves, strikers, etc.?
Ooh. Oh, that's a good one. Sorry, what did you just call that? Like obscure mechanic?
Yeah, obscure fighting mechanic.
Oh my gosh. I'm thinking. Uh, sorry. That's a really good question. I don't have an answer ready. Because all the ones that I like, I've already stolen and put into my games. So I'm trying to think of something more obscure. Um, I'll say. I'm sorry. Can I come back to that one?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
guess
We can move on to a different question.
yeah.
Uh, I can probably ask a follow-up question on that because you mentioned that you put some obscure mechanics into your game. So could you name a couple that you really like or enjoy implementing in your game?
Yeah, sure. Not necessarily obscure, but like some of my favorite mechanics from games that I've played. Um, I loved a lot of in particular, some of the games that really had a formative impression on me were Street Fighter 4, Marvel 3. I was an 09er who started with Street Fighter 4, and the Blaze Blue series. And Tough Love Arena, my first game, I wanted to keep it simple, but I wanted to have some basic meter mechanics to have something for advanced players to snap onto. And those were heavily influenced by Blaze Blue. You had like the Blaze Blue, I think they called Rapid Cancel, and I maybe just called exactly that in Tough Love Arena. They have like a dead angle or a block cancel that we call the reject, and they have a burst. And I put all those in. In my new game, Scramble Heart City, we have push block, which is heavily inspired by Marvel 3's push block. Um, I'll say maybe obscure that it's in both my games that made a really big impression on me was neutral blocking,
Okay.
which I now know is in Tekken, but was introduced to me through NJIT 4, Naruto Ikitu Ninja Tyson 4 for the GameCube, which was Japan only because I was a weeb. And I would play it a bunch with my friends, and that game was just two buttons, B and A, and then like Y was throw and X was super. And then the triggers were like some limited 3D and teleport mechanics. It was like a 3D game, kind of like Soul Calibur. But you had neutral block. You had high-low, but you would just naturally block everything mid. And that made it feel so approachable for me and my friends who were less into fighting games. And when I made Tough Love Arena and I knew I wanted this to appeal to beginners, I thought like that's an amazing idea to revisit because Fantasy Strike at the time when I started this, like the premier beginner 2D fighting game made by David Serlin, hence why I'm a student of his, did not have neutral blocking, but they had removed crouching. So if you wanted to block, you had to hold back, like Street Fighter. But because there was no way to crouch, you had to walk backwards. In Street Fighter, there's this concept called bulldogging, where you want to block, but you don't want to give up ground. So you'll walk forward a little bit and then crouch block. Because if you're crouching, you don't move. Then you walk forward, crouch block. You couldn't do that in Fantasy Strike. If you wanted to approach and then block, you were just walking back and forth and not really making ground. And I thought that that was a huge loss for a game that's trying to like onboard you to 2D fighters and footsies. So TLA has neutral block, and the original germ of inspiration was definitely GNT4.
All right. Awesome. Next question. How do we make a good single player mode for a fighting game?
That's the $1 million question that someone needs to solve. Um, for context, for other people, uh, the appeal of fighting games to me is fighting another human. That's what makes them interesting, makes them endure. But not everyone wants to fight another human being. We're not always another human being is around to be fought. And the way games have done single player in the past has ranged from arcade mode, where it's just a gauntlet of CPU battles and maybe increasing like difficulty with a unfair boss at the end because it's an arcade machine and they want to eat your quarters, to maybe a story mode that maybe has like some predetermined fights with a little bit of like visual novel in between, to some story modes that are just a straight up visual novel in your Guilty Gear game. No combat, but it has all the story in there. I'd say the most interesting one that I want to explore more, because I don't know a ton about it, but in one of the Blaze Blues, it may not be the last one, it may have been one of the ones in the middle and they didn't bring it back. It had a game mode called The Abyss, which was kind of like a roguelite or a roguelike, where you would play essentially this long string of CPU battles, but after each one, you would get unlock like modifiers to add to your character. It would increase certain stats. That could be easy to do procedurally in terms of like faster speed, health regen, meter regen, more damage, more defense, whatever. But those would be like randomized. You'd have some choice. And so you'd like go through this run, sort of building the stronger and stronger character to see how far you could get. This is an interesting twist on the survival mode of just how far can you go if your like health persists. That added some of the roguelike appeal of runs feel different. There's some player agency to get better at. I think that's underexplored, but I swear whoever solves this problem, uh, I mean that might be part of the success of Street Fighter 6. It has the World Tour mode, which has this character customization where you build your own character over time, add a bunch of moves to them. There's story moments, there's cool 3D cutscenes, there's like a 3D environment to go around. You can just like Tatsumaki random old women in the street and start a fight. There's a lot of fun things there. So, but that's also really expensive. I can't do that. I'm an indie dev. So, something like The Abyss feels more attainable.
All right, we've got a lot of questions coming in. So, all right, next one. What's your favorite fighting game?
Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Awesome.
Despite the Honda matchup chart and how unfun that game can be to play, I discovered it way later. Like, I played it as a kid, and I got into fighting games with Street Fighter 4. And then I found this. I live in Brooklyn now, but for a while I lived in Manhattan. And there was a now defunct retro video game store called 8-Bit and Up in the East Village. And it was on my walk home from my corporate job to my apartment. And I'd swing by like 3 times a week. And the clerk who worked there, who would just be bored out of his mind because no one was there, and she went out of business, they had a cabinet, and we would just like play for like an hour. And then people would come in the store and be like, yeah, I'll help you in a second. And he would just be mashing with me. And I love that game. I think there's so much to appreciate about that game, both historically because they sort of accidentally invented the entire genre. There's all these interesting design decisions that I think came from like first principles and aesthetics. Turned out to just be really good ideas mechanically. There's so much juice and sauce to that game. I could talk about that game for an hour. That's my answer.
Awesome, awesome. All right, these two questions are kind of related to each other. I'm going to start with this first one. So, within the fighting game, we know the fighting game genre is pretty much dominated by big names in Street Fighter. So let's talk about indie fighting games, right? Why are indie fighting games still such a niche genre, and is it worth making an indie fighter given it might not necessarily get as much attention as something like Street Fighter, things like
Yes. So in the indie fighting game scene, I hope I'm not insulting anyone. The ones that immediately come to mind are Skullgirls, Rivals of Aether, um, some like Dojin games, the fan games like the Idol Showdown, uh, and not a ton more. And of course, Tough Love Arena. There's a lot of indie fighting games. I've met a lot of other developers at the shows and stuff, but it's not a lot of them have broken into the mainstream. Them's fighting hurts. I'd say the biggest success is within, in terms of like FGC attendance and like major presence, have been uh, Skullgirls, Them's Fighting Hurts, and Rivals of Aether. I I think that there are reasons to do it and not do it. The appeal to making an indie fighting game is that I believe it has a really high floor. When you talk about like an audience and what you could potentially achieve in terms of either making like a really esoteric, pathologic type game to like making Fortnite. Um, that is the spectrum of games, I guess. Fighting games, I feel, have a really high floor install base because this is a genre that is pretty starved, and people who play fighting games play other fighting games. Like when you play Call of Duty or when you play Counter Strike, you don't necessarily play a bunch of other shooters at the same time. You probably just play Counter Strike. But even people who are really into like Street Fighter may dabble in Strive. They may play Little Rivals. Everyone play Smash. There's a lot of crossover, and our big events are not Overwatch tournaments. They're fighting game tournaments where they celebrate fighting games in general, and most people enter multiple games. So it's a great environment, very uniquely great environment where you can just naturally get a lot of cross promo and a lot of cross overlay uh, in a way that like if you watch a sponsored stream of some Valorant player playing some other shooter and be like, "Yeah, it's cool, it's like Valorant." People aren't going to play it. They don't want to play like Valorant, they'll play Valorant. But if you see Justin Wong playing Tough Love Arena and be like, "Oh, I love this psh psh sounds," like then people might check it out. This is what happened to us, and we were very lucky. Um, that said, I do think it has a lower ceiling. You're never going to make as much money as Fortnite or or other like indie hits. Like Skullgirls was Omega successful, but it was kind of the first, and it's been out for like 15 years. I don't think a fighting game can ever be successful on the scale of other indie games like a Hades or an Undertale, like because they just don't have that broad of an appeal. A lot of people are turned off by the inherent 1v1 competitive nature. So the pros is the community. The cons is I think it's a lot of upfront work. It is hard to make a cheap fighting game. Like they don't have to be as expensive as really expensive ones, but again, with like the floor and ceiling, like there's a minimum amount of effort you have to put in. If you want people to take it seriously and get invested, you have to build online with networking and rollback netcode. Probably need a cast of at least 8 characters. You probably need to spend a lot of time on balancing. Uh, if you want to get it to events, it probably needs to like work on consoles because most events don't run PCs because it's too cumbersome and expensive. And that's a lot of barriers to entry. Tough Love Arena, my first one, I really struggled. Still only a cast of 6 characters, basically browser only. I'm very proud of it, and it's totally success on my terms and what I had in terms of my goals. Um, that still took like 4 years to make 6 characters, and 3 of them are clones of the other 3. Uh, and people still ask and like leave 2 comments of when are they going to add more characters? And the answer is never, because one, I'm working on a new game. It's just like characters are expensive, but characters are like core content, and there's definitely like a floor where people won't even pay attention to your game if you don't have that many characters. People are dogging on 2xKO for launching with like only 10 characters, right? And I'm hoping to, after 3 years, release Scramble Heart City with 8 characters. Like, it just takes a lot of time. You can't
Yeah.
make it quick.
All right. A semi-related question. Actually, pretty related question. How do you make your game stand out? How do you make a fighting game stand out in the indie scene? Especially given there are so many of them.
Uh, I believe success is you need the hook and then you need the staying power. Um, you need you ultimately need to make a game with interesting mechanics and good game feel. I've tried a lot of other indie fighting games where I think they look gorgeous, but the game feel isn't really there. Feel a little off, or moving around doesn't feel great. Because the creator just isn't aware, or they haven't spent a lot of time like in the nitty gritty, and that's really important for retaining people. But you need to keep the people in the door. And that can either be an aesthetic hook because it's like, hey, here's an idol fan game, or here's the pony fan game, or here's a game that looks like Skullgirls, or here's you know a Smash clone that's actually good, called Rivals of Aether, right? With maybe some mechanical twists, or Ronald McDonald, as we saw in the pre-show. These are strong hooks. For me personally, my hook on both my games is the browser. Both my games are browser based. Scramble Heart, I'm trying to take more seriously and build in a way I'll eventually be able to bring it to platforms in a way that Tough Love Reunite can and never can because it's so locked into the browser architecture-wise. But that is a very strong hook for me, and that is 100% why I've had the success I've had, because not only the unique accessibility edge that gives it, but we get a lot of free press and a lot of free praise from people just being impressed by the fact that it runs in a browser. And it's a very unreserved community ever since Flash, in terms of just like browser games in general. So that's been our like blue ocean area. But I wouldn't recommend you make a game in a browser, especially a multiplayer real-time action game. Terrible decision. I could talk more about it later if you want, about all the many problems I've had. But yeah, you have to find your hook to get them in.
So actually related to the browser point, we did get a question earlier. Were there any unique challenges you faced when designing a fighting game for a web browser?
When deciding, or I guess unique
Designing.
challenges, I decided to make Tough Love for your browser primarily because at the time that's what I knew. My tool set was browser. I worked full time as a full stack web developer for different web companies in New York City. A few startups, a few big ones. And I'd already made some like little visualizer tools in browser. They're kind of embarrassing, but if you want to find them at like mpolweeks.com, it's a little like Pac-Man, but it's Polnareff running away from Iggy in a toilet. Little like dumb little fun experiments like this, just for my own curiosity and enjoyment. That taught me a lot of the basics of like how to do input, how to do rendering on a browser, such that when I had an opportunity to make a bigger game, a fighting game, because I found an artist that was willing to work for free and a fun project together that we thought would take the 3 months, that it was faster for me to start in browser than to like pick up. So that's the number one reason. But even at the time, I also knew like it'd be fun to have a browser game, because my very first taste of fighting games was playing like emulators in the computer lab at school, playing the OG like Teen Titans Flash game or the Powerpuff Girls Flash game, and feeling like that is an underserved audience. And then we release it, and then we get all this attention because apparently being in the browser is this huge hook. So when it came time to build a second one, that's what made that very clear. Of like, I think we had so much advantages by being in the browser, and how easy that made it to share with people, and to at school apparently. And I don't want to throw away that advantage if I already have this built-in install base and I already know how to do it. To some extent, I've learned a lot of things about GPUs that really convinced me you shouldn't make games in a browser. But that's why. So it started as a very practical thing. These were the tools I knew, and now is very much that's the niche I found, and I think that I can succeed.
In terms of the challenges, it sounds like a lot of, because like designing is so much different than working with the hardware that underlies it. A lot of the challenge was just learning takes very minutes to run the browser.
Yeah, to make a very long story short, the problem with the browser is you're running it in JavaScript, you're running it in a hostile environment that has a lot of protections due to ages of security incidents. Like when you ask JavaScript what time it is, sometimes it lies to you, because that was used in something called the Heartbleed exploit, whereby constantly you would like have some malicious JavaScript from an ad, and constantly ask what time it was, and from that they could like determine some information about the machine you were running on based on how it responded. So now time, when you ask for the time, it's way less precise. So that's a barrier. The big one that's messing me up now with the GPU is the browser is a sandboxed environment. In a desktop application, you can ask like, "Hey OS, please give me the GPU," or "Please give me this much VRAM." The browser, you have no idea. You just say, "Please give me some," and when the OS doesn't want to give you anymore, it just completely kills your tab. There's no warning. There's no way to handle it. You just die because it is sandboxed. It's important. That's security, so that malicious websites can't mess you up. But that is a hostile environment to develop, and JavaScript, and just like not a lot of support and tooling. And it's a constantly shifting standard. People try and play it in Firefox and it doesn't work. These are problems. Sorry, what was the question? Okay.
Let's talk a little bit more about your games. Top Love Arena and Scramble Heart City both have a large theme of love. So what to make love your fighting?
That's a good question. I don't have a very interesting answer. Tough Love Arena was this collaboration with this artist, Amy Shu, where I wanted to make a game, they wanted to make a game. So I was like, I'm just grateful for any art. I just need a guy that looks like this. Go nuts. And so they came up with the character designs of these kind of featureless. Some people interpret them as like being like Play-Doh people, but just like these featureless characters. And in that, when we knew we were going to do like these clone characters to save on art, where you can see that beef and pork are similar, the two cat boys and the two lanky guys, noodle and rice and garlic and onion, in order to help differentiate them, especially before they got all the accoutrement of like the different hats and stuff that came later, was the little undertale heart in the center and then having it reversed for the evil clone. So that was the aesthetic that Amy chose. And we already knew it was going to be kind of cute. And then when we tried to pick a name months later, it's like, let's build off the heart motif. Scramble Heart City was much less intentional. This was, we were trying to come up with a 3-word name. I agonized over it for a really long time. But we had to like pick a name by a certain deadline because we were going to exhibit at AnimeNYC and we wanted to print signage. And up until that point, we've just been calling it like Tough Love Tag or Entitled Game. But I wanted to have a nice sign to print out, and it takes time. So we were like thinking like, what's going to be a unique URL we can grab because it's a browser game. It's a name that like has a unique abbreviation because people are going to talk about this game on Reddit, and if we call it, you know, Scramble Grow, then it's going to be SG. That's going to collide with Skullgirls. Can't do SG. Can't do BB, GG, SF, TK, SC. There's like so many that are taken, right? And I liked the Scramble and I liked the city, and we kind of settled on heart to indicate the lighter tone and as a kind of nod to my first game. So the first one is much more heart aesthetic. The second one is kind of just there in the name, and it helps, along with the word Scramble, indicate the lighter tone, but it's not heart themed per se.
I think for maybe one or two more questions. Interesting question for general. Explain about advertising and growing.
Ooh, okay. So Tough Love Arena had no budget. It was again supposed to be just something that me and Amy did for fun for 3 months and then ballooned. We worked on it for a year. Was like, oh my god, we're so far from done, but we're tired of work. I'd hate to put another year into this and then like no one ever plays it. So let's just release it as it is now, see if there's any interest. And there was, wonderfully. But aside from like traveling and like making some merch that then we sold for a small margin at these events, we never really put money into Tough Love Arena from that perspective. Aside from we hired a composer and we hired a lawyer at one point for like the EULA, but that was it. All of the advertising for it, all the marketing was purely word of mouth, and then I think the both the culture of fighting games and then the strong hook of it being a browser game gave it a lot of novelty. So a lot of fighting game YouTubers like Sajam and Justin Wong and people from Panda Global back when it existed, Wooly from Super Best Friends did videos on it. They're like a full in-depth or just talked about it for 10 minutes because they're like, did you hear about there's a game, browser game, a fighting game that you can play on the browser. You can play it, and also like, at launch was you can play it on your phone. And like, you can play it while pooping. That was like a big part of the narrative in the first month. The only like effort we did is I through that little Street Fighter stats website back from Street Fighter 5, I had like a tiny like 100-follower audience essentially, and I knew Ultra David not super well, but he's a commentator for Street Fighter and a lawyer in his day job. And I had consulted him back when I made the stat website in 2016, being like, am I going to get sued by Capcom? And then I consulted him for the EULA. So I was like, hey, it's a courtesy, because he was nice. Like, we're going live today. Here's a tweet. Can you just retweet this? Like, no effort. I'm trying to give you as little to do as possible. Just say like, hey, I worked on this. Here it is. And I sent that to a few other people, like James Chen and Sajam, and some of them just, you know, ignored it because they probably have a million DMs. But Ultra David tweeted it out. I think James Chen did. And then that got seen by a few more people, and then they checked it out. And then Sonic Fox retweeted it. with like a recording on their phone where they did a combo. And that's, I think, was like a big viral moment. So if I can learn anything from that, it's like, having a little bit of pre-established connections, having the strong hook. And I really tried to like reduce the barrier to entry. Tried to give them as little to do as possible. Just be like, all you have to do is like click the retweet button. I'm not asking you to do a big testimonial or anything. I really appreciate it. And very, please, sir, I'm a big fan. Like begging. And then from that, it just led to another thing. I will say conventions are expensive. I don't think they always make sense for a lot of people in a lot of situations and a lot of games. Some games aren't really convention friendly, especially like a narrative game where someone has to sit down with headphones for like a half hour. I don't know if that's like a great use of your time in terms of just like how many people will actually go through. But for an arcade multiplayer game where people just stand, two people walk up, two friends, they play together, they have fun, people can watch, it looks poppy. Like fighting games, I think are really well positioned for places like PAX. And going to those, I networked with other people, or I'd get like random interviews from people who were just walking around the floor looking for interesting things. So there were areas where I tried to try to put myself in an opportunity to get free marketing. That's sort of how I did it. For Scramble Heart, we're trying to do a lot of the same avenues in terms of building that core fan base that will just like submit clips of our videos to Say Jam's Will It Kill, and even asking, and to build like the legitimacy so that maybe James Chen checks it out again. And it helps a lot that we have the brand from the first game, and we have some brand recognition there within the scene. We're probably going to, closer to release, do some like paid influencer marketing, and we've been doing conventions. But that's the main way I plan to do marketing in terms of paying, is just conventions and influencer marketing. I don't think it makes sense for me to buy random like Reddit ads or anything, or do a billboard. The best advice I have heard is just like, invest a lot in your Steam page. I hired someone recently to be a producer, which is something I'd never thought to do before, who's just helped me just handle a lot of emails and planning and scheduling things so I can do my job, which is like developing characters, because I'm kind of a bottleneck on it. Because I've got these artists, but I still do a lot of stuff myself. And like one of the things is I was like, can you just do the Steam page for me? Because I'm not very good at it, so I didn't put a lot of time or effort into it, and it looks like shit. And she just spent a week like good looking screenshots, recording some footage, looking at other pages to see what looks good, and that looks way better. And Steam page is a mass amount of free publicity, because if you have sufficient wish lists, it puts it into the algorithm for you, and you could do yourself a lot of favors in terms of like how much money you have to put in versus the reward you get. And I'll be around until like 4:30, milling around if anyone wants to talk after the fact. Mhm. That's a good but very open-ended question. I will say what I can think to say is, for Scramble Heart, I can say it's been a very collaborative process with my main animator, Savvy, who does both the character designs and the frame animation. I will usually approach him saying, I have like an archetype in mind. Hey, we need to have a zoner, or we need to have like a big guy with armor moves. I'm thinking this big body type. We could have like a big blunt weapon. Give me some ideas. And so Savvy will come back with like 3 sketches, and he'll have like a guy with a log, a guy with a pillar, and then one of them was this guy, Book, a guy with a big book. Hits you with a big book. And I was like, that's way better than the idea I had. Let's go with that. And then that inspired a bunch of other things down the road. We try to have a really iterative process. So I try to come in with a strong vision, so he doesn't have like the total blank page. And then just say like, this is the seed, give me a few ideas, and I will select from those, and we'll just keep going from there. So we pick the character that way, outline the tools, we'll talk back and forth with that, and it helps that Savvy also plays fighting games, both Rivals of Aether and Strive. Whereas Amy did not play fighting games and it was a lot more sort of like one-sided and prescriptive, it really helps to have a creative partner who knows the genre and I can bounce ideas off of. And for moves, it'll be like, okay, we want to have some sort of, it's a launcher. It needs to have a hitbox roughly in this area. It needs to come out in 10 frames. So what motion will look good in terms of having enough time to get there for that, and maybe in character. And we'll iterate on that. The thing I most stress, for me, for both of my games, the end bottleneck will probably be art, because I'm making 2D games. It just takes a long time to draw all these sprites. So I try to waste as little art as possible. And I do that by just being really strategic. So we are, for example, these characters are black and white, right? So Harmony on the right, like right now, her walking is just like a single frame. That's fine. And for attacks, maybe we'll define like a few keyframes. We'll reuse a few things, but we'll do that just to like get down the functionality, and then we'll play test like, is this a fun button? Do people like playing with this? Does this work? And then if it does, then we'll go back and we'll clean it up. But in that meantime, while we're testing it, Savvy goes and works on something else. So it can be like first initial character designs. For attacks, it's just like, give me 3 drawings, like 1 for startup, 1 for active, 1 for recovery. I'll experiment with the durations. I'll experiment with the boxes. It may not match 1-to-1. We'll get, and we just go from there and try it. For this game, it helps because we have the lighter tone. We definitely default to things that we think are funny. It's like the rule of cool, but the rule of goofy, where like he has a book, he has a move where he reads the book, and it's like, this is trying to fight myself. Oh my god. Gotta. If you try to interrupt him reading the book, he squishes you in the book. And then we're like, wait, can we do more of that? And so what we want to do going forward is that if you get hit by that, you get flattened into a page. So we just did that for her as like a proof of concept. So far, we're liking the idea. Now we'll go back, do 1 frame for every character, and then color them in. Yeah. I mean, probably Rushdown is the easiest. There's a lot of fun ways to do it, and I think it's less feast or famine to balance, because you can do a lot with just like their speed and their options. Whereas I think it's really easier to accidentally make a zoner or a grappler who's way too strong or way too weak, because they're naturally very polarizing signs. But someone who just wants to get in your face and hit you, like, is a pretty safe direction with a surprising amount of variety. Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. That was a great talk.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you're here till.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm here till 4:30.
Cool. Quick burger, should we mention it's gonna a little for the because he is surprise. Oh, a little surprise. This will be surprise eventually. It's a club.